Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're jumping into a story that's it's a bit of a head-scratcher. It's all about what happens when one of the greatest figures of faith we know of gets completely blindsided by fear. So let's just get right to the heart of it. This is the question this whole story makes you ask. Can a hero, a real hero of faith, lie just because they're scared? And here you have it, straight from the man himself. This is Abraham's confession, and it's just so raw and honest. No excuses. I thought they would kill me. This one feeling, this fear, is what drives everything that's about to happen. So to really get what's going on, we've got to look at the man at the center of this story, Abraham. And the timing of all this, that's where things get really interesting. Okay, so get this. The timing is just wild. This very chapter, Genesis 20, is the first time in the entire Bible that Abraham gets called a prophet. I mean, that's not a small thing. A prophet is someone who speaks for God. It's a massive deal. And yet, in the same exact story where he gets this incredible title, what does he do? He acts out of pure, gut-wrenching fear. Not divine confidence, not some holy boldness, just fear for his own life. The contrast is just, wow. So you're probably wondering, what did this fear push him to do? All right, let's walk through what actually went down in this place called Gerar. So here's how it plays out. First, Abraham and his wife, Sarah, they're new in town. Abraham gets this idea in his head that the king is going to see how beautiful Sarah is and, kill him to take her. So he comes up with a plan. Just tell everyone you're my sister. Okay, so that's exactly what he does. And sure enough, the king, a guy named Abimelech, takes Sarah into his palace. But then, and this is a big then, God steps in. He comes to Abimelech in a dream and basically says, "You are a dead man. You've taken a married woman." As you can imagine, the king completely freaks out. He immediately returns Sarah, throws a bunch of gifts at Abraham to say sorry, and then Abraham, the guy who caused on the trouble, prays for the king's household to be healed. What a story, right? Now here's the really clever part of his plan. His lie wasn't a total lie. See, Sarah actually was his half-sister. But of course, that's not the whole story, is it? He conveniently left out the most important part, and she's also my wife. So it's not a straight-up lie, it's a half-truth, which might be even more deceptive, designed purely to save his own skin. This whole thing just opens up a can of worms, doesn't it? Is a lie like this ever okay? Is it ever justified? To really dig into that, we've got to look at some other situations where people weren't exactly truthful. And this is such a great comparison because it's all about the why, the motive. You've got Abraham over here who tells this half-truth out of fear for himself, but then you have this other story about a woman named Rahab. She tells a bold-faced lie to enemy soldiers. Why? To protect spies who are hiding in her house, to save their lives. And she's remembered as a hero for it. It's the same action, lying, but with a totally different heart behind it. And it's not just in ancient texts, right? History is full of these moments. I mean, think about Oskar Schindler during the Holocaust, using all kinds of deception to save over 1,000 people from the Nazis. It all comes back to this incredible idea that to save one life is to save an entire world. The motivation is completely different. It's about saving others, not just yourself. Okay, but let's pause for a second. I know what some of you are thinking. Why didn't Abraham just trust God? Why the whole sister lie thing? And that is a fantastic question. It gets us right to this really important line between trusting God and, testing God. I mean, it's the natural question, isn't it? If God's on your side, why use tricks? But the answer to this actually tells us something really profound about what faith looks like in our messy, complicated world. For a perfect example of this, just look at the story of Daniel's friends. They're about to be thrown into a fiery furnace. And look what they say. They say, "Our God is able to deliver us." They have total confidence in God's power. But then they add this crucial line, "But even if he does not, we still won't bow down." See that? Their faith wasn't a guarantee that they'd be saved. They were ready to die. They weren't putting God on the spot. And then you have Jesus himself making this point so clear. He's tempted to do something crazy, jump off the highest point of the temple, just to make God catch him. And what does he say? "You shall not put the Lord your God to the test." Basically, faith isn't about being reckless. It isn't about manufacturing a crisis just so God has to bail you out. You're still supposed to use your head. So what's the bottom line here for Abraham? Well, this is so important. His moment of fear, his lie, it didn't disqualify him. God didn't say, well, that's it, you blew it. His calling to be a prophet, his promise to be the father of a nation, all of that still stood. There's this idea that God's calling on your life is irrevocable. That means he doesn't take it back when you mess up. And that brings us to the really big picture here, maybe the most important idea of all. When we look at Abraham's story, we're not supposed to just see one bad moment. We're supposed to see that faith isn't about a single performance. It's not a test you pass or fail. It's a marathon. You know, there's this chapter in the Bible, Hebrews 11, that's often called the Hall of Faith. And its definition of faith is so interesting. It says faith is confidence in what we hope for and assurance about what we do not see. But think about what's missing. It never says faith is the absence of fear. It never says faith is never having doubts. It's about trusting in the promise even when you can't see the proof. And this chapter lists person after person who lived this out. You have Noah. By faith, he spent years building a gigantic boat for a flood that had never happened before. Can you imagine the looks he got? He was acting purely on God's word. Then there's Moses. By faith, he walked away from being a prince of Egypt. I mean, all the power, all the wealth, to suffer with his people instead. Why? Because he was looking forward to something better that he couldn't even see yet. And I love this one. Even Sarah is in there. This is the same Sarah who laughed out loud when she heard she was going to have a baby in her 90s. I mean, who wouldn't? But the point is, her faith journey included that moment of total disbelief. And yet, she ended up trusting God's promise. And that's really the whole point, isn't it? If you look at this hall of faith, it's not a hall of perfection. These people were flawed, they got scared, they messed up. But they were persistent. They kept going, they kept getting back up, and trusting in a God who they knew was bigger than their mistakes. Most of them died without even seeing the full promise come true, but they never stopped believing it was coming. So that's what I want to leave you with. If faith really is a marathon, not a sprint, if it's measured by your whole life's journey and not just one single moment, what does that mean for you? How does that change how you look at your own marathon, with all its good days and all its bad ones?
Okay, so let's just jump right in. When you think of the father of faith, Abraham, what's the image that, pops into your head?
Well, it's a classic one, right? The hero. The gold standard for unwavering spiritual strength.
It's the Sunday school version, yeah.
Well,
The guy on the mountain, wind at his hair, looking at the stars with just, absolute rock-solid confidence.
the man who passed every single test God gave him.
Right. But I was going through the notes for today's deep dive, and I found something that completely messes with that picture. The source material points out that the very first time the Bible uses the word prophet,
The very first time.
that specific title for Abraham, he isn't doing something brave. He isn't building an altar.
No, he is definitely not doing any of those things.
He's actually in the middle of a massive lie. He's terrified for his life. And he has, effectively thrown his wife under the bus to save his own skin.
It's a bit of a shock to the system, isn't it? We want our heroes to be perfect, but the source material we're looking at today, specifically Genesis chapter 20 and Hebrews 11, it paints a picture that is so much more complicated.
And more human.
And honestly, a lot more human.
It's messy, and that's what makes it so fascinating. So welcome to the deep dive. Today we are tackling the human side of faith. We're looking at fear, at strategic deception, and the ethics of survival.
And it forces us to ask a really difficult question right out of the gate. Why would a man chosen by God lie to a powerful king just to survive? And maybe more importantly, does that disqualify him?
Exactly. So let's jump straight into the story. We're in Genesis chapter 20. So to set the scene, Abraham has moved his whole operation to the Negev. He's kind of wandering, and eventually he settles in a place called Gerar.
And this is Philistine territory. It's a new town, a new king. It's dangerous.
And almost immediately, Abraham makes a calculation. He looks at the local culture. He looks at his wife, Sarah, who the text makes a point of saying is very beautiful, and he just assumes the worst.
He assumes, I'm a dead man.
Yeah, that's his whole thought process.
It's a completely fear-based response. So he falls back on this strategy of deception. He tells Sarah, look, when they ask, just tell them you're my sister.
She's my sister. And we need to pause here. This isn't just like a little white lie.
No.
He's basically making his wife available to the local dating pool to make sure nobody murders him. And, predictably, this creates a huge
A
problem.
massive problem. The king of Gerar, Abimelech, He sees Sarah, he's told she's single effectively, and so he takes her into his palace.
And you have to see it from Abimelech's side, right? He's a sort of the villain of the story.
Yeah.
But he thinks he's acting completely above board.
He has no idea he's just taken the wife of God's chosen man. He thinks it's a legitimate arrangement.
It's so wild. Abraham, our hero, sets the trap. Abimelech, the pagan king, just walks right into it.
But then God gets involved, and this is where it gets really interesting.
Yeah, because God doesn't go after Abraham for lying. He goes after the king.
It triggers a divine intervention, and it is intense. The text says God appears to Abimelech in a dream, and he does not mince words. He says, "Behold, you are a dead man."
Can you imagine waking up to that? You are a dead man because of the woman you have taken? It's a literal nightmare.
It is. But what's so fascinating is Abimelech's reaction. He doesn't just cower, he argues.
He does. He defends himself. He pleads his innocence, basically saying, Lord, are you going to kill an innocent nation? Didn't they both tell me they were siblings?
He's got a solid point. He's playing the clean hands card. He's saying, I acted on the information I was given. How is this my fault?
And the most shocking part is God kind of agrees with him.
To a point, yes. God says, yes, I know you did this in the integrity of your heart. And then he reveals this crucial detail that the source material really zeroes in on.
What's that?
God says, that is why I kept you from sinning against me. Therefore, I did not let you touch her.
Whoa. So God physically, or I guess supernaturally, stopped the situation from going too far.
That's what the text implies. Yes, God prevented it. But then comes the ultimatum. God orders Sarah to be returned, and the stakes are just incredibly high.
So high. He says if Abimelech refuses, he dies, and his entire people die with him.
Which seems so harsh for a guy who was just tricked.
It does. If you're listening, you're thinking, why is the innocent guy getting threatened with extinction while the liar is sitting safe in his tent?
It just shows how fiercely protective God is of that covenant line, regardless of our feelings about the fairness of it. But here's the kicker, and it connects right back to what you said at the start.
The prophet thing.
The prophet thing. God tells Abimelech to return the woman because Abraham is a prophet.
And that's the first time that word ever appears in that context.
Genesis 20, verse 7, the very first use of prophet in Scripture. And it's applied to Abraham right in the middle of his moral failure. God tells the king he is a prophet and he will pray for you and you will live.
Let me get this straight. Abraham is the one who lied. Abraham started this whole mess out of fear. And God looks at the king and says, that guy over there, that's my prophet. You need him to pray for you.
It highlights a profound theological point from the sources. That the status of prophet isn't always about moral perfection in every single moment. It's a calling, an office he holds.
So the job description stands even when the employee is messing up.
Precisely. So let's look at the morning after the big confrontation. Abimelech, who probably didn't sleep a wink, calls Abraham in. And he asks the obvious question, what have you done to us?
Why did you set me up? And Abraham's defense is, well, it's really revealing. He doesn't just apologize. He explains his logic.
He admits to the fear. He says, I thought there was no fear of God in this place, and I believed they would kill me to get my wife.
It was a survival calculation, pure and simple.
But then he drops the technicality. He reveals that Sarah actually is his half-sister. Same father, different mothers.
Ah, the classic, it wasn't a total lie defense.
Yeah, the source calls it a truth immedius, a half-truth. He wasn't fabricating the relationship entirely, but he was absolutely withholding the most vital piece of context.
Right, the marital status. Which brings us to the core of this whole deep dive, the ethics of survival. The source material argues that Abraham might have been acting within a sort of justifiable framework.
Which is a challenging idea because we're taught lying is a sin, period.
But the source argues that deception can be, in some cases, a higher good. And it draws this really strong parallel to another figure in the Bible.
To Rahab.
Exactly, from the book of Joshua.
Joshua chapter 2, Rahab, a prostitute in Jericho. When the king's soldiers show up and ask, where are the Israelite spies? What does she do?
She lies to their faces, point blank, sends them on a wild goose chase while the spies are hiding on her roof.
And she isn't condemned for it. She's celebrated for it. She's considered a hero for protecting God's people.
So there's a hierarchy of values. Telling the truth is important, but protecting innocent life from, say, a wicked nation or an unjust authority, that's a higher good.
The source even uses a modern analogy. It brings up Oskar Schindler in World War II.
Right.
He lied to the Nazis constantly.
Yeah.
Falsified documents, cooked the books. Why? To save Jewish lives. We don't call him a liar. We call him righteous because he prioritized life over truth-telling to a murderous regime.
It's that Jewish principle mentioned in the source. He who saves a life saves the whole world. So the argument is, Abraham saw Gerar as a place with no fear of God and made a tactical decision.
A desperate move in what he saw as a dangerous world.
Okay, but hold on. I have to push back here because I think the listener might be thinking this too. Schindler didn't have a direct promise from God that he'd be the father of many nations. Abraham did.
He did, an explicit promise.
So if God promised to make him a nation, that implies God is going to keep him alive to build that nation. Shouldn't Abraham have just trusted God to protect him without the whole lying thing? Isn't this, at its core, a failure of faith?
And that is the crucial tension. This is where our source makes a very, very important distinction between trusting God and putting God to the test.
Okay, break that down for me. What's the difference?
The source points to two other examples. First, Daniel chapter 3. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego at the fiery furnace.
Right.
They tell the king their God can save them, but then they add that key phrase, but even if he does not,
we still will not bow.
That's faith. They didn't demand a certain outcome. Now contrast that with the second example, Matthew chapter 4, the temptation of Jesus.
On top of the temple.
Exactly. The devil says, jump. He even quotes scripture saying the angels will catch you. He's basically daring Jesus, force God's hand, prove he protects you.
And Jesus shuts him down.
He refuses. He quotes back, do not put the Lord your God to the test.
So jumping off a building just to see if God will catch you isn't faith.
It's recklessness. And the source argues that for Abraham to just walk into Gerar and announce, here's my beautiful wife, please don't kill me, without any common sense, that might be seen as putting God to the test.
That's a really interesting take. So using your wits, even if it's messy, isn't necessarily a lack of faith. It's refusing to be reckless.
But the source is balanced. It admits Abraham was acting out of fear. This wasn't some supreme act of spiritual confidence. He was scared.
But he was still the prophet, even though he lied, even though he was scared.
Which is where the source brings in Romans 11.29. For the gifts and the calling of God are irrevocable. Abraham's fear didn't cancel God's plan. God's faithfulness wasn't dependent on Abraham's perfect performance.
That is actually really comforting. And the resolution of the story shows that, right?
Yeah.
Abimelech gives Sarah back.
He does, and then some. He gives Abraham sheep, oxen, servants, and specifically 1,000 pieces of silver.
Which is a huge amount of money.
It is. The king says it's to vindicate Sarah, to publicly restore her honor. And then, fulfilling that prophetic role, Abraham prays for the king.
And the prayer works. It says God healed Abimelech and his household so they could have children again.
Which implies that God had struck the household with infertility during the crisis. So Abraham's prayer literally restores life to the kingdom he almost ruined.
It's just such a complex story. But it's the perfect segue to our second text, Hebrews chapter 11, the Hall of Faith.
Yeah, the all-star list.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the source uses this to really broaden our definition of what faith actually looks like. Because if you only look at Genesis 20, you might get a skewed view.
You might. Hebrews 11 defines faith as confidence in what we hope for and assurance about what we do not see.
And then it just starts this roll call. You've got Abel, Enoch, who just disappeared.
Noah building an ark for a flood he'd never seen. And of course, Abraham and Sarah are right there in the list. It talks about Sarah conceiving when she was past age and Abraham's willingness to sacrifice Isaac.
And Moses, choosing to suffer with his people instead of enjoying the fleeting pleasures of sin. So far, it's a list of victories, miracles, escapes.
Right, and that's usually where we stop reading. We think faith equals success, but the source pivots hard to the end of the chapter, and this is where it gets gritty.
Yeah, the tone shifts completely. It stops being about escaping danger and starts listing people who didn't escape.
It mentions those who were tortured, jeered at, chained.
And that one specific detail that always gets me sawed in two. I mean, that's just horrific.
It is. Tradition says that was the prophet Isaiah. The text talks about people wandering in deserts wearing sheepskins, destitute, mistreated.
So why are they in the Hall of Faith? They didn't get the miracle? They got killed.
That is the aha moment the source wants us to see. The text says that all of these people, the victors and the martyrs, were commended for their faith.
So faith isn't a mechanism to guarantee a good outcome.
Exactly. The source emphasizes that none of them received the full promise in their lifetime. They saw it from a distance. Faith, in this view, is persistence. It's loyalty to God whether you're conquering a kingdom or you're suffering in a cave.
That completely changes how you read Abraham's story in Jar. His faith wasn't that he was never afraid. His faith was that he kept going. He stayed on the journey.
Yes. The source wraps this up with that image of the mustard seed. You don't need great faith, just faith the size of a mustard seed. Because a small faith in a big God is enough.
It's not the size of your faith, it's the object of your faith.
Precisely. Even the father of faith had days where he was just operating on sheer panic. But his story didn't end there.
That's a powerful takeaway. We're so hard on ourselves when we feel fear or when we use our own messy strategies. But the common thread isn't perfection. It's just not quitting.
It's the endurance of the calling.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, what does this all mean for us?
Well, the source leaves us with this really provocative thought from the very end of Hebrews 11. It says that all these heroes, Abraham, Sarah, the martyrs, they're all waiting.
Waiting for what?
For us. The text says that God had planned something better so that they would not be made perfect without us.
Wait, unpack that. They can't be perfect without us.
It suggests the history of faith is one single continuous story. Think of it like a relay race. Abraham ran his leg, Rahab ran hers, the martyrs ran theirs. But the race isn't over.
They passed the baton.
They're in the stands now, they're that great cloud of witnesses. But the consummation of their faith, the final victory, it actually depends on our generation continuing that same journey. Their story is incomplete without our chapter.
That gives you chills. It feels like we're holding the baton right now.
We are. And just like Abraham, we might be scared. We might make mistakes. We might have days where we're just trying to survive in our own Gerar. But the calling is irrevocable. And the story includes us.
Man, that is a lot to think about. From lying to a king to being the missing piece for the heroes of the past. Faith is a much wilder ride than we usually give it credit for.
It certainly is.
Well, that's all the time we have for this deep dive. Whether you're facing a crisis or just trying to keep the faith day to day, remember, even the best of them stumbled, but they kept walking. Thanks for listening.
Keep digging.